Wendigo, Minnesota. This legend has haunted the Ojibwe, Cree, and other indigenous tribes of the northern United States and Canada for centuries, but its roots are particularly strong in the wild, untamed lands of Minnesota. The Wendigo is often described as a gaunt, emaciated figure, towering over men with a skeletal frame that barely clings to life. Its eyes are sunken deep into its skull, glowing with a malevolent hunger that can never be satisfied. Some say it has a heart of ice, a reflection of the frozen wilderness it calls home. But what truly makes the Wendigo terrifying is not just its appearance, it's what it represents. According to the legend, the Wendigo is born from the darkest of human desires, cannibalism. The story goes that during harsh winters, when food was scarce and survival seemed impossible, some people turned to eating human flesh to stay alive. But this act of desperation came at a terrible price. Those who succumbed to this primal urge would transform into a Wendigo, cursed to roam the forests, eternally hungry and never able to be sated. The more it devours, the more ravenous it becomes. But the Wendigo is more than just a cautionary tale about cannibalism. It's a symbol of greed and excess. The creature represents a perverse form of consumption, a warning against taking more than one needs. In the lore of the Ojibwe and other tribes, the Wendigo is not just a myth. It's a real threat, a spirit that can possess people, turning them into monstrous beings with an insatiable appetite for human flesh. These Wendigo-possessed individuals were believed to exhibit strange behavior, becoming increasingly paranoid, violent, and withdrawn. In some cases, entire communities would turn on someone they believed to be possessed, leading to tragic and often fatal consequences. One of the most famous cases of Wendigo possession occurred in the late 19th century, when a Cree man named Swift Runner murdered and ate his entire family during a brutal winter. Despite having access to a nearby trading post, Swift Runner claimed that a Wendigo spirit had overtaken him, driving him to commit the heinous acts. His story became infamous, and he was eventually executed for his crimes. But the legend of the Wendigo grew even stronger. Kushtaka, Alaska. Alaska, with its vast, untamed wilderness, is home to some of the most chilling legends in North America. Among these, none are more feared by the native Tlingit people than the terrifying Kushtaka. Known as the Land Otterman, the Kushtaka is a shape-shifting creature that lurks in the dense forests and icy waters of Alaska. But don't let its otter-like appearance fool you. This is no cute, playful animal. The Kushtaka is a sinister being that preys on those who wander too far into the wild. According to legend, the Kushtaka can transform into an otter, or even take on the form of a human, often mimicking the appearance of someone familiar to its victim. It uses this deceptive ability to lure unsuspecting people away from safety, leading them deeper into the wilderness where they become lost and disoriented. Once isolated, the Kushtaka reveals its true nature, either abducting its victim or transforming them into one of its own, another Kushtaka, doomed to wander the wilderness in eternal torment. What makes the Kushtaka even more terrifying is that it preys on your deepest fears. If you're afraid of drowning, it will lure you to the water's edge. If you fear being lost, it will ensure you never find your way back. The Tlingit people believe that only certain spiritual rituals or the sound of a dog's bark can protect you from the Kushtaka. Mogollon Monster, Arizona. Deep within the rugged and remote wilderness of Arizona's Mogollon Rim, a vast forested plateau that stretches for miles, lurks a terrifying creature known as the Mogollon Monster. Described as Arizona's very own Bigfoot, this elusive beast is said to be over 7 feet tall, with massive, hairy limbs covered in long, dark fur. Its eyes glow a haunting red, and witnesses claim that it emits a foul stench, similar to that of rotting flesh, adding to the fearsome aura that surrounds it. Sightings of the Mogollon monster date back to the early Native American tribes who believed the creature was a guardian spirit of the forest. However, more modern accounts began surfacing in the early 1900s, when campers, hikers, and even hunters reported seeing this terrifying figure lurking in the shadows, watching them from the dense woods. Those who encounter the creature often describe an overwhelming sense of dread, as if they're being stalked by something far more intelligent and malevolent than just an animal. But what makes the Mogollon monster truly chilling is its unnerving behavior. Unlike many cryptids that are content to stay hidden, this creature is known to let out blood-curdling screams in the dead of night, sending shivers down the spines of those who hear it. Some even claim that it's capable of mimicking human voices, luring unsuspecting victims deeper into the forest, where they find themselves hopelessly lost. And sometimes they're never seen again. The Dark Watchers, California. These shadowy figures are said to silently observe those who wander through the remote and fog-covered peaks of the Santa Lucia Mountains. Tall, featureless, and dressed in dark, cloaked attire, these eerie beings are often seen at twilight, standing motionless on the ridges, silently watching the valley below. The legend of the Dark Watchers dates back to the Chumash Native Americans, who spoke of these enigmatic beings in their oral traditions. They believed that the Dark Watchers were ancient spirits, guardians of the land, who observed the comings and goings of people with an indifferent, yet imposing presence. These spirits were not to be disturbed or approached, as they were said to dwell in the thin space between the world of the living and the world of the dead. When Spanish settlers arrived in California in the 1700s, they too began to encounter the Dark Watchers. They referred to them as Los Vigilantes Oscuros, and like the Chumash before them, the Spanish believed that these figures were supernatural entities, perhaps even omens of misfortune. As the years passed, the sightings continued, and the legend only grew stronger. But what exactly are the Dark Watchers? Theories abound, but no explanation seems to fully capture the unsettling essence of these apparitions. Some say they are simply optical illusions, shadows cast by the jagged peaks and the fading light of the setting sun. Others believe they are manifestations of the mind, hallucinations brought on by the isolation and rugged beauty of the landscape. Witnesses describe a profound sense of dread when encountering these figures. They report feeling as though they are being watched by something ancient, something that is beyond human understanding. Some have even said that when they try to approach the Dark Watchers, the figures vanish into thin air, disappearing as quickly as they appeared. Whether spirits, hallucinations, or something else entirely, one thing is certain: the Dark Watchers have left an indelible mark on California's folklore. Riverdale Road, Colorado. Riverdale Road is a stretch of road so steeped in dark lore and chilling tales that it has earned the nickname the Highway to Hell. What appears to be an ordinary, winding road by day transforms into something far more sinister after the sun sets. The most well-known story tied to Riverdale Road begins with a grand mansion that once stood along its path. According to legend, a man who lived there went mad one night and set his own home ablaze, trapping his wife and children inside. The fire consumed the mansion, and the souls of his family were said to have been lost to the flames. Now, locals claim that if you drive along Riverdale Road at night, you can see the ghostly remains of the mansion. Some have reported hearing the agonizing screams of the trapped family, echoing through the dark. Another popular tale involves a jogger who was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver along the road. The tragic incident left behind a restless spirit who is said to haunt the area to this day. Many drivers have reported seeing the ghostly jogger running alongside their cars, only to suddenly vanish into thin air. Even more unnerving are the tales of phantom footsteps chasing after those who dare to walk the road at night. No matter how fast they run, the sound of footsteps always seems to be right behind them. But most importantly, Riverdale Road also has its own haunted vehicle, an old Camaro said to be driven by a young man who died in a horrific crash along the road. The car is rumored to appear out of nowhere, challenging drivers to a deadly race. Those who encounter the Camaro often describe it as a chilling experience, as the ghostly car reportedly disappears into thin air right after speeding past. Some say that if you accept the race, you're doomed to the same fate as the Camaro's ill-fated driver. Annabelle Doll, Connecticut. The legend of Annabelle started in 1970 when a nursing student named Donna received the doll as a gift from her mother. At first, it was just an ordinary Raggedy Ann doll, a cute and harmless toy that Donna kept in her apartment. But soon, strange things began to happen. Donna and her roommate Angie noticed that the doll seemed to move on its own. They would leave it in one position and find it in another when they returned. Sometimes the doll would be found standing upright, and other times it would be found in different rooms altogether, as if it had a life of its own. But the doll's unsettling behavior didn't stop there. The two roommates began finding handwritten notes around the apartment. The messages were written in childlike handwriting on parchment paper, something neither Donna nor Angie owned. The notes said things like, "Help me," and "Help Lou," referring to Angie's boyfriend, Lou, who was staying with them at the time. Frightened by these events, Donna and Angie decided to seek help from a psychic medium. The medium told them that the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins had taken residence in the doll. According to the medium, Annabelle was a 7-year-old girl who had died tragically on the property before the apartment building was constructed. The spirit claimed to be lonely and wanted to stay with Donna and Angie, seeking their companionship. Moved by the story, Donna gave the spirit permission to stay in the doll. But this act of kindness would prove to be a grave mistake. After the medium's visit, the doll's behavior became increasingly aggressive. Desperate for help, Donna and Angie contacted renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens quickly determined that the spirit inside Annabelle wasn't a benevolent child, but rather a demonic entity. The Warrens explained that the spirit had lied about its identity in order to manipulate the roommates and gain their trust. Its ultimate goal was to possess one of them, and the doll was merely a conduit for the demonic presence. The Warrens decided that the doll had to be removed immediately. After performing a series of prayers and rituals, they took Annabelle with them to their occult museum, where they believed they could keep the demonic spirit contained. Since her arrival at the Warrens' Occult Museum, Annabelle has been kept in a specially built glass case, locked away and sealed with holy water. But even in her confinement, she's believed to be responsible for several chilling incidents. One famous story involves a visitor to the museum who taunted the doll, mocking her supposed powers. On his way home, the man lost control of his motorcycle and crashed into a tree, dying instantly. His girlfriend, who survived, claimed that they had been joking about Annabelle just before the accident. Today, the legend of Annabelle has become a pop culture phenomenon, inspiring a series of horror movies and capturing the imaginations of paranormal enthusiasts around the world. But beyond the Hollywood dramatizations, the real Annabelle remains locked away, her malevolent presence undiminished by time. Corpse Light, Delaware. The story of the Corpse Light dates back to the 18th century, when Cape Henlopen was a notorious graveyard for ships. The dangerous shoals and treacherous waters claimed countless vessels, earning the area a fearsome reputation. The origins of the Corpse Light are shrouded in mystery, but one of the most popular tales involves a grieving lighthouse keeper named Samuel Greaves. Samuel was responsible for maintaining the Cape Henlopen lighthouse, a crucial beacon for ships navigating the perilous waters. One fateful night, during a violent storm, Samuel's wife and daughter were aboard a ship trying to reach the harbor. Despite his best efforts to guide the ship to safety, it crashed into the rocks, and Samuel lost his family to the raging sea. Overcome with grief and guilt, Samuel abandoned his duties and disappeared into the night. But soon after, sailors began reporting sightings of a strange, flickering light on the beach, a light that seemed to move with a mind of its own. Those who followed the light found themselves in shallow, dangerous waters, their ships dashed against the rocks. Locals believed that Samuel had returned as a vengeful spirit, his lantern guiding ships to the same fate that had befallen his loved ones. The legend says that the corpse light is a harbinger of death, appearing just before disaster strikes. Some have claimed to see a shadowy figure holding the lantern, leading sailors to their doom. Others say the light is disembodied, floating just above the waves, always out of reach. Skunk Ape, Florida. Of course, Florida needs some wild cryptid for this list. Known as the skunk ape, this cryptid is Florida's version of Bigfoot, but with a distinctly southern twist. The creature is described as a massive, bipedal, ape-like being, standing between 6 to 8 feet tall, covered in shaggy, matted hair. But what sets the skunk ape apart from other Bigfoot legends is its unbearable smell, a pungent odor described as a mix of rotting garbage, skunk spray, and wet dog. The first modern sightings of the skunk ape occurred in the 1950s and 1960s, as more people began venturing into the swamps. Hunters, hikers, and even park rangers reported encounters with the creature. But it wasn't until the 1970s that the skunk ape truly captured the public's imagination. In 1974, several sightings were reported in Dade County, leading to a media frenzy. The creature was even blamed for livestock deaths and mysterious disappearances in the area, cementing its status as a fearsome urban legend. The skunk ape's origins are shrouded in mystery. Some believe it is a relic from prehistoric times, a surviving member of a long-extinct species. Others suggest it may be an escaped exotic pet or a genetic experiment gone wrong. The most popular theory, however, is that the skunk ape is a cousin of Bigfoot, adapted to the humid, swampy environment of Florida. According to local lore, the skunk ape is highly reclusive and avoids human contact, only emerging at night to scavenge for food. Stories abound of people encountering the creature while driving down isolated roads or camping deep in the wilderness, only to be chased off by its terrifying screeches and that unforgettable stench. Cursed Pillar, Georgia. In the heart of downtown Augusta stood a seemingly ordinary column of stone, known as the Cursed Pillar. The origins of the Cursed Pillar trace back to the early 1800s, during a time when Augusta was expanding and a bustling marketplace was planned for the center of town. According to local lore, a traveling preacher arrived in Augusta and set up shop near what would later become the site of the Cursed Pillar. The preacher, known for his fiery sermons and doomsday prophecies, demanded the right to preach to the crowds at the market site. However, the townsfolk and city officials, eager to complete the market's construction, refused his request and ordered him to leave. Angered by the rejection, the preacher is said to have pointed to one of the newly erected pillars that supported the market structure and proclaimed a chilling curse. If anyone should ever move or destroy this pillar, terrible misfortune and death will follow. The preacher's ominous words unsettled the townspeople, but they brushed it off as the ravings of a madman. Little did they know that his curse would become a dark and enduring part of Augusta's history. Over the years, the market was destroyed by a series of natural disasters, fires, and other misfortunes. Yet the cursed pillar remained standing. No matter what happened around it, the pillar seemed invincible. The most infamous story tied to the cursed pillar occurred in the early 1900s, when a worker attempted to relocate the pillar during road construction. Just as the preacher had warned, disaster struck. The worker was reportedly killed in a freak accident involving the pillar, reinforcing the belief that the curse was real. After this incident, the legend grew, and the people of Augusta began to view the pillar as something to be feared. In 2016, the pillar was finally destroyed, not by human hands, but by an errant vehicle that crashed into it during a storm. The driver of the vehicle was seriously injured, and the debris from the pillar's wreckage was quickly removed and disposed of, as if the city couldn't bear to keep any remnants of the cursed stone. Night Marchers, Hawaii. The Night Marchers, known in Hawaiian as the Huakai Po, are the ghostly apparitions of ancient Hawaiian warriors, forever doomed to roam the earth in a spectral procession. The legend of the Night Marchers dates back to ancient Hawaiian culture, where these warriors served as the royal guard to the highest chiefs, known as ali'i. These chiefs were considered so sacred that commoners were forbidden from looking directly at them. If a commoner did cross paths with these royal processions, they faced immediate execution. The Night Marchers are believed to be the spirits of these warriors, still protecting their chiefs, even in death. They emerge from the ocean, rising from ancient burial sites, or descending from mountain trails, moving in a single file line. Their path is believed to follow sacred routes, often traversing places that hold deep spiritual significance, like old battle sites or Hawaiian temples. Those who have encountered the Night Marchers describe them as ghostly figures adorned in traditional Hawaiian attire, carrying torches that illuminate their spectral forms. Some witnesses report hearing the eerie sounds of conch shells blowing, drums beating, and faint chants in the distance, an ominous warning that the night marchers are near. But the most terrifying aspect of these encounters is their gaze. It is said that if you make eye contact with the night marchers, you are marked for death, and your soul will be taken to the underworld. To avoid this deadly fate, there are a few protective measures. The most important thing is to never look at them. If you hear the distant sounds of drums or see the faint glow of torches, it's best to immediately lie face down on the ground, showing respect and submission. Some Hawaiians believe that stripping naked or urinating on oneself can also help deter the spirits, a desperate and shameful move to avoid their wrath. However, the most surefire way to survive an encounter with the night marchers is if you happen to share a bloodline with them. In this case, they will spare you out of respect for your shared ancestry. Dead Children's Playground, Alabama. Nestled within Maple Hill Cemetery in Huntsville, Alabama, the state's oldest and largest graveyard, lies a playground that looks like it belongs in any small town. Swings, slides, and a climbing structure. But this isn't just any playground. Locals call it the Dead Children's Playground, and its name is far from just a creepy moniker. It's said that this eerie spot serves as a gathering place for the spirits of children who have passed away, drawing them in with the sounds of laughter and play. Legend has it that the playground was built on the same ground where many children were buried during the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918. Since then, strange occurrences have been reported, especially during the late hours of the night. Visitors claim to have seen swings moving on their own, heard the faint laughter of children when no one is around, and even spotted shadowy figures darting between the trees. But the most chilling stories are those of the playground's ghostly inhabitants seeking out new friends to join their eternal games. Parents say that their children are talking to invisible friends like they are having a real conversation. Some say they've seen small handprints appear on the swings, as if invisible children were gripping them tight. While the local government once attempted to remove the playground, protests from the community forced them to rebuild it. Water babies, Idaho. The water babies are believed to be vengeful spirits, their restless souls unable to find peace. They are victims of a deadly famine. Back then, members of a Native American tribe preferred to let their children drown instead of letting them starve to death. A dark event that supposedly tainted this river. Visitors to Massacre Rocks have reported hearing the eerie sound of babies crying, even when no one else is around. Some say they've seen small, childlike figures playing near the water's edge, only to vanish when approached. Others have claimed to hear splashing in the river, as if something or someone is swimming just out of sight. According to the legend, the water babies have also developed a sinister side. Some stories suggest that these spirits have evolved into malevolent creatures, luring unsuspecting victims to the water with their cries. Once their prey is close enough, they drag them under the surface, pulling them to a watery grave. This darker version of the legend has made the water babies a source of fear for many who visit the area. Ghost elephants, Illinois. The story of the ghost elephants begins in the early hours of June 22nd, 1918. The Hagenbeck Wallace Circus, one of the largest traveling circuses of the time, was on its way to a performance in Hammond, Indiana. The train carrying the circus performers and animals stopped near Hammond to fix an overheated axle, But disaster struck when another train, a troop transport train, barreled into the circus train at high speed. The impact was catastrophic. The wooden cars of the circus train were obliterated, and within moments the wreckage burst into flames. The fire consumed everything in its path, and over 85 people, mostly circus performers, lost their lives in the inferno. Many of the victims were never identified, and they were buried in a mass grave at Showman's Rest, marked by simple gravestones that often bear no names, only the word unknown. But the circus performers weren't the only victims of that tragic day. Many of the circus animals, including several elephants, perished in the fire as well. Their bodies were buried alongside the performers, and it is said that their spirits linger in the area to this day. For nearly a century, visitors to Showman's Rest have reported strange occurrences that defy explanation. The most famous of these are the ghostly apparitions of elephants that seem to haunt the cemetery grounds. Witnesses have described hearing the faint, mournful trumpeting of elephants in the dead of night, echoing through the cemetery as if the animals are calling out from beyond the grave. Green-clawed beast, Indiana. In the summer of 1955, the calm waters of the Ohio River near Evansville, Indiana, became the setting for one of the state's most chilling urban legends, the terrifying encounter with the green-clawed beast. On a hot August afternoon, two friends, Naomi Johnson and Louise Lamble, were enjoying a refreshing swim in the river when their peaceful day took a sinister turn. Out of nowhere, Naomi felt something latch onto her leg with an incredible force, pulling her under the water. Desperately struggling to break free, she clawed at the surface, only to be dragged down again. She later described the sensation as though a powerful clawed hand had wrapped around her leg. In a panic, Louise managed to pull Naomi to safety. But when they reached the shore, they noticed something disturbing. Naomi's leg was marked with deep scratches and a strange blue-green stain that couldn't be washed off for several days. What could have attacked Naomi in the depths of the river? Theories quickly spread, and soon the story of the green-clawed beast began to circulate. Described as a half-human, half-amphibious creature with green skin and razor-sharp claws, this aquatic monster is believed to lurk in the murky waters of the Ohio River, waiting to drag unsuspecting swimmers to a watery grave. Some locals speculate that the creature is a remnant of ancient Native American legends, a water spirit or demon that protects the river and punishes those who disturb its sacred waters. Others believe the green-clawed beast could be linked to the infamous Flatwoods Monster sightings in nearby West Virginia, suggesting that it might be an extraterrestrial being that somehow found its way into the river. But perhaps the most eerie part of this story came just days after the attack. Naomi Johnson was reportedly visited by a mysterious man in a dark suit who warned her not to speak about the incident. The man claimed to be from the U.S. Air Force, raising suspicions that the government knew more about the creature than they let on. Villisca Axe Murder House, Iowa. On a warm summer night in June 1912, a horrific crime shocked the small community and left a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. The house was the site of a brutal mass murder, where 8 people, including 6 children, were found bludgeoned to death with an axe. The victims were Josiah Moore, his wife Sarah, their 4 children, and 2 young guests, Ina and Lena Stillinger. The The crime scene was so gruesome that it stunned the town and drew national attention. Despite extensive investigations and numerous suspects, the killer was never caught, and the motive for the crime remains a mystery. The details of the murders are as chilling as they are tragic. The killer or killers had entered the home late at night, creeping through the darkness to commit their horrific act. Each victim was found with severe head injuries, inflicted by the blunt end of an axe. The mirrors in the house were covered, perhaps a sign of guilt or fear from the perpetrator. The scene was eerily quiet, with no signs of forced entry or a struggle, leading some to believe the killer may have been someone the family knew. Many believe that the spirits of the victims remain in the house, unable to move on due to the violent and sudden nature of their deaths. The tragic energy left behind seems to permeate the very walls of the building, drawing those fascinated by the paranormal and the macabre. Some speculate that the spirits are trying to communicate, perhaps seeking justice or simply making their presence known. Today, the Villisca Axe Murder House is a museum, open to those brave enough to explore its dark past. Guided tours take visitors through the house, recounting the horrific events of that fateful night and the countless paranormal experiences reported since. Saline River Ghost, Kansas. The legend tells of a young pioneer woman who lived near the banks of the Saline River with her husband. They were homesteaders, working the land and dreaming of a prosperous future. But those dreams were shattered one dark, stormy night when a group of outlaws came upon their cabin. The husband was brutally murdered, and the woman, in her desperate attempt to escape, ran towards the river. She plunged into the rushing waters, trying to flee her attackers, but the storm made the river treacherous, and she was swept away by the current. Her body was never found, and it's said that her soul still lingers along the Saline River, forever searching for peace. According to the legend, on stormy nights, especially when the river swells, you can hear her mournful cries echoing through the trees. Some claim to have seen her ghostly figure wandering the riverbanks, drenched in water, her face twisted in anguish. It's as if she's reliving that terrifying night over and over again, forever trapped in the moment of her death. What makes the Saline River ghost so unsettling is the persistence of the sightings. Even today, people living near the river report strange occurrences. Campers have heard unearthly wails in the dead of night, and fishermen have seen a spectral woman standing on the water's edge, only for her to vanish into thin air as they approach. Those who've witnessed the Saline River ghost often describe a sudden chill in the air, the unmistakable feeling of being watched, and an overwhelming sense of sorrow that lingers long after they leave the area. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Kentucky. This sprawling Gothic structure was originally built in 1910 as a two-story hospital to accommodate tuberculosis patients. At the time, tuberculosis was an incurable disease, and the sanatorium was designed to be a self-sufficient facility. Despite the best medical care available at the time, the disease claimed countless lives, and the sanatorium quickly became a place of despair and death. The death toll at Waverly Hills is estimated to be between 6 and 63,000, though the true number remains unknown. This staggering number of deaths has left a mark on the building, with many believing that the spirits of the deceased still linger within its walls. One of the most notorious legends associated with Waverly Hills is the story of Room 502. This room is infamous for being the site of two tragic incidents involving nurses. The first occurred in 1928, when a nurse was found hanging from a light fixture. She had allegedly unalived herself after discovering she was pregnant out of wedlock, a scandalous situation at the time. The second incident happened in 1932, when another nurse reportedly jumped from the window of her room to her death. To this day, visitors and paranormal investigators claim to feel an overwhelming sense of dread in this room. Some even report seeing shadowy figures or hearing disembodied voices pleading for help. Especially the children's ward is another area with a reputation for paranormal activity. This ward was dedicated to children suffering from tuberculosis, some of whom were separated from their families for years. The sounds of children's laughter, footsteps, and even music boxes playing have been reported by visitors. Some claim to see ghostly figures of children peeking around corners or standing in the halls. The poignant atmosphere of this area, combined with the joy and sorrow experienced by the young patients, makes it one of the most emotionally charged parts of the sanatorium. The Rougarou, Louisiana. The legend of the Rougarou dates back centuries, with origins in French folklore brought over by early settlers. The name Rougarou itself is derived from the French words loup-garou, meaning werewolf. However, the creature has since evolved, taking on its own unique characteristics within the bayous and swamps of Louisiana. According to the legend, the Rougarou is cursed to roam the swamps and forests in search of its next victim. The curse can be passed on in various ways. Some say it is inflicted on those who break Lent for 7 years in a row, while others believe it is the punishment for committing a grievous sin. The transformation into the Rougarou is said to occur under the light of the full moon, with the afflicted person becoming a vicious, bloodthirsty beast. But here's where it gets even more chilling. Once transformed, the Rougarou prowls the dark, preying on anyone unfortunate enough to cross its path. Some tales suggest that the Rougarou hunts for human blood, while others say it feeds on the souls of the living. However, the curse doesn't last forever. At dawn, the creature reverts to its human form, but the curse remains, waiting to transform them again when night falls. Colonel Buck's tomb, Maine. The story begins in the late 18th century, during the height of the witch trials and intense superstition in New England. Colonel Buck, a prominent figure in the area, was a strict Puritan known for his stern leadership. According to legend, Buck once condemned a woman to death, accusing her of being a witch. Some versions of the story say that the woman was not just any ordinary person, but someone with whom Buck had an illicit relationship, possibly even the mother of his illegitimate child. As the legend goes, the woman was executed, and before she died, she placed a curse on Colonel Buck. She warned him that she would return to mark his grave as a sign of her vengeance. As her body turned to ash, something horrifying occurred. A leg, whether through supernatural means or some other strange circumstance, survived the flames. This leg was said to be proof of the curse, and her last words would haunt Buck for the rest of his life. Years later, after Colonel Buck passed away, a large granite monument was erected in his honor in Bucksport. However, shortly after the tomb was completed, a strange, inexplicable stain appeared on the stone, a stain in the shape of a leg. Despite repeated efforts to clean or remove the mark, it always returned, almost as if it was burned into the stone itself. Locals immediately connected this eerie phenomenon to the curse of the supposed witch that Colonel Buck had condemned. The leg-shaped stain remains visible on the monument to this day, a chilling reminder of the curse that Colonel Buck could never escape. Some believe that the stain grows darker whenever someone in Buck's bloodline dies, further cementing the idea that the curse lives on through his descendants. Goatman, Maryland. In the shadowy woods of Prince George's County, Maryland, a terrifying creature is said to lurk. A half-man, half-goat monstrosity known simply as the Goatman. With the head of a goat, the body of a human, and a blood-curdling scream that echoes through the night, this urban legend has haunted the locals for decades. The legend of the Goatman first began circulating in the 1950s and 1960s, and there are two primary versions of his origin. The most popular tale involves a scientist from the nearby Beltsville Agricultural Research Center. According to the story, this scientist was conducting genetic experiments on goats. In a horrific twist of fate, one experiment went terribly wrong, transforming the scientist himself into a hideous creature, half human, half goat. The newly formed Goatman, driven mad by his transformation, fled into the woods, where he now terrorizes anyone who dares to enter his domain. Another version of the legend paints the Goatman as a more malevolent, supernatural figure. In this tale, the Goatman is a vengeful spirit, possibly even a demon, who preys on teenagers and young couples who venture too far into the woods, particularly around the old Governor's Bridge Road, a notoriously eerie spot in the area. The Goatman is said to wield a rusty axe, hacking his victims to pieces and leaving nothing but blood and terror in his wake. His rage, the legend claims, is fueled by the encroachment of humans into his forested home, and he will stop at nothing to protect his territory. The Goatman's legend gained national attention in the 1970s, when a rash of mysterious animal mutilations were reported in the area. Local newspapers ran sensational stories, linking the gruesome deaths of dogs and livestock to the Goatman. Whether or not the creature was truly responsible, the tales fueled the fear and fascination with the legend, cementing the Goatman as one of Maryland's most notorious urban legends. Bridgewater Triangle, Massachusetts. The triangle roughly spans from Abington in the north to Freetown in the southeast and Rehoboth in the southwest. What makes this region so eerie is the sheer variety of supernatural occurrences reported here, ranging from ghostly apparitions and UFO sightings to bizarre creatures and strange animal mutilations. Many believe that the roots of the Bridgewater Triangle's haunting can be traced back to the Wampanoag people, the Native American tribe that once inhabited the area. According to legend, the land was cursed by the Wampanoag after their sacred burial grounds were desecrated by colonial settlers. This curse is said to be responsible for the area's dark history and the inexplicable events that continue to occur to this day. Witnesses have reported sightings of mysterious creatures that defy explanation. One of the most famous of these is the so-called Bridgewater Triangle Bigfoot, a large, ape-like creature seen by multiple witnesses in the Hockomock Swamp. Descriptions of this creature vary, but most agree that it is a tall, hairy, humanoid figure that prowls the swamp under the cover of darkness. In addition to Bigfoot sightings, the triangle is also known for frequent UFO activity. Since the 1970s, there have been numerous reports of strange lights in the sky, hovering objects, and unexplained aircraft. Some believe that the Bridgewater Triangle is a portal or hotspot for extraterrestrial activity, adding another layer of mystery to this already perplexing region. Hell's Bridge, Michigan. The story that surrounds this bridge is one of murder, madness, and eternal damnation, a tale that has haunted the local community for over a century. According to local lore, a man named Elias Frisk who was a respected member of the community, harbored a dark secret. One night, Elias was entrusted with the care of several children from the village, as their parents attended a town meeting. However, instead of watching over them, Elias led the children deep into the woods, where he bound them with rope and gagged them to keep them silent. Elias then proceeded to slaughter them one by one, claiming that he was doing God's work, ridding the world of their evil. After completing his grisly task, Elias tossed their lifeless bodies into the river below the bridge. When the parents returned and found their children missing, they organized a search party that eventually led them to Elias. The madman, covered in blood, tried to escape across the bridge, but was caught by the villagers. Overwhelmed by grief and rage, the parents of the slain children took matters into their own hands. They executed Elias on the spot, hanging him from the very bridge where he had committed his heinous crimes. Since that day, the bridge has been cursed, or so the legend goes. Locals claim that the spirits of the murdered children still linger in the area, trapped in eternal torment. Some even say that if you stand on the bridge for too long, you can feel the cold, ghostly hands of the children tugging at your clothes, trying to pull you into the river below. But it's not just the children's spirits that haunt this place. Elias Frisker himself is said to still roam the area, his malevolent presence lurking in the shadows. Witnesses have described seeing a dark figure with glowing red eyes, staring at them from the woods or standing silently on the bridge. The legend claims that Elias's soul was damned to hell for his crimes, and now he returns to the bridge to lure unsuspecting victims into the same fate. Robert Johnson, Mississippi. Robert Johnson was born in 1911, and like many African Americans in the South at the time, he faced a life of hardship and poverty. But Johnson had a dream to become the greatest blues musician the world had ever known. Unfortunately, by all accounts, young Robert wasn't much of a guitar player. Locals in the small Mississippi towns where he wandered would say that his playing was mediocre at best. But then, something strange happened. After vanishing for some time, Johnson transformed from a novice into a virtuoso, a blues guitarist whose music was so powerful, it seemed otherworldly. The sudden change in his talent sparked whispers among those who knew him. They claimed that Robert Johnson had made a deal with the devil. The story goes that one dark night, Johnson took his guitar and walked to a lonely crossroads. Some say it was where highways 61 and 49 intersect. Others point to a more remote location in the Delta. There, he was met by a large, shadowy figure. The devil, so the legend says, tuned Johnson's guitar and in exchange for his soul, granted him unmatched musical prowess. Johnson's haunting blues melodies, with lyrics that hinted at his unholy pact, only fueled the fire. Songs like Crossroad Blues and Hellhound on My Trail spoke of a man tormented by something far darker than the struggles of life in the South. His music captivated and terrified those who heard it, as if each note was a cry for help from a soul in eternal torment. And while this story is fascinating, it is most likely false. It is assumed that Johnson secretly learned from another skilled blues musician before returning to his hometown. Either way, Robert Johnson's rise to fame was short-lived. In 1938, at just 27 years old, he died under mysterious circumstances. Some say he was poisoned by a jealous husband. Others claim it was the devil coming to collect his due. Zombie Road, Missouri. The road was originally built in the late 19th century as a means for workers to access the nearby railroad tracks. Over time, it became a popular spot for young couples looking for a secluded place to hang out. And, as you might expect, where there's isolation, there are stories of danger. According to local law, a man named the Zombie lived in a shack deep within the woods, far from prying eyes. Descriptions of this mysterious figure vary. Some say he was a vagrant, others claim he was an escaped mental patient. But one thing remains consistent. He had a penchant for stalking anyone who dared to venture too close to his lair. Some even believe that he was responsible for several disappearances in the area, earning the road its ghastly name. While the Zombie may be the most well-known figure associated with the road, the legends surrounding Zombie Road go far beyond a single sinister man. In the early 20th century, the road became infamous for deadly car crashes, often attributed to the treacherous terrain and the road's winding, narrow nature. However, some believe that these accidents weren't purely coincidental and that a malevolent force was at play, luring unsuspecting drivers to their doom. The Phantom Hitchhiker, Montana. Picture this. You're driving down a lonely stretch of highway in the remote wilderness of Montana. The sun is setting, and a thick fog begins to roll in, making the road ahead barely visible. Suddenly, in the distance, you spot a figure, a lone hitchhiker standing by the side of the road, arm outstretched, thumbing for a ride. Instinctively, you slow down, but as you approach, a chill runs down your spine. There's something off about this hitchhiker. The figure is eerily translucent, and before you can even register what you're seeing, it vanishes into thin air. According to the tale, the Phantom Hitchhiker is the spirit of a young man who tragically died in a car accident on this very stretch of highway. Drivers who claim to have encountered the Phantom Hitchhiker report similar experiences. They see a man in his late 20s or early 30s wearing outdated clothing, often described as a plaid shirt and jeans. He looks lost and forlorn, his eyes pleading for help. But as they approach, the hitchhiker vanishes, leaving nothing but an unsettling emptiness in his place. Others have described a more intense encounter. After picking up the hitchhiker, he sits silently in the back seat, giving vague directions. But as the driver nears his supposed destination, the hitchhiker suddenly disappears, leaving the driver with a cold, eerie feeling and the unmistakable sense that they've just transported a ghost. Radioactive Hornets, Nebraska. The legend originated in the 1950s, a time when fear of nuclear fallout was at an all-time high. The construction of nuclear missile silos across the Midwest, including in Nebraska, sparked widespread panic about radiation and its potential consequences. People worried about the invisible dangers lurking in the air, the water, and even the wildlife. According to the legend, after a series of nuclear tests, something unnatural began to happen in the remote areas of Nebraska. Hornets, once ordinary insects buzzing around the countryside, became monstrous in both size and aggression. Locals began reporting sightings of giant hornets, some as large as a human hand, with a sickly, glowing hue. These hornets weren't just big, they were deadly. The radiation, they said, had mutated them, making their venom far more toxic than any normal sting. The story goes that these hornets started attacking livestock, their sting so powerful that a single strike could kill a full-grown cow. Humans who survived reported being chased by swarms of these irradiated hornets, their bodies covered in painful, festering stings that wouldn't heal. As the story spread, so did the fear. farmers refused to work their fields alone, and children were kept indoors after dark. While there's no concrete evidence that these radioactive hornets ever existed, the legend has persisted in Nebraska folklore. Some locals claim that the hornets still lurk in the most isolated parts of the state, waiting to strike unsuspecting travelers. Others believe that the story was born out of the very real fear of nuclear disaster that gripped the country during the Cold War. Spiteful Mermaid of Pyramid Lake, Nevada. The lake, named for the pyramid-shaped rock formations rising from its depths, is a place of great cultural significance for the Paiute people. But it's not just the strange geology that makes Pyramid Lake so eerie. It's the tale of the spiteful mermaid, a vengeful spirit whose presence has terrified locals for generations. According to the story, the tribe once found a beautiful mermaid living in the lake's waters. At first, they were fascinated by her otherworldly beauty, but when she sought to marry a young Paiute man, the elders of the tribe rejected her. They believed her presence was unnatural, a bad omen, and they feared the consequences of allowing such a union. In their rejection, they cruelly banished the mermaid from the lake, driving her away into the wilderness. Heartbroken and humiliated, the mermaid's sorrow soon turned to rage. She cursed the lake and the Paiute people, vowing that anyone who ventured too close to the water would be dragged down into the depths to meet a watery grave. The legend warns that anyone who sees the mermaid will soon befall a tragic fate, pulled into the lake's depths by her powerful, vengeful grip. The most unsettling part of this legend is that Pyramid Lake has indeed been the site of many mysterious drownings and disappearances over the years. While skeptics may attribute these to strong currents and the lake's treacherous underwater terrain, others are convinced that the spiteful mermaid is responsible. Goody Cole, New Hampshire. Goody Cole was an elderly woman who lived in Hampton during the 1600s, a time when fear of witches ran rampant throughout New England. Goody Cole was a poor, reclusive woman who didn't fit in with the rest of the townspeople, and her odd behavior quickly made her the subject of suspicion. In 1656, she was accused of witchcraft, becoming the only woman in New Hampshire's history to be tried and convicted of such a crime. The charges against Goody Cole were typical of the era. Neighbors claimed that she cursed their livestock, caused mysterious illnesses, and even had the ability to transform into animals, such as a cat or a crow. One story tells of a young boy who claimed to have seen Goody's specter approach him in the night, tormenting him until dawn. The townsfolk's fear of her grew to a fever pitch, and eventually she was sentenced to imprisonment, spending years behind bars. But even after serving her time, Goody Cole was never truly free. Upon her release, she returned to Hampton, only to find that the townspeople still regarded her with fear and hatred. Isolated and ostracized, she lived out her days in poverty, and when she died in 1680, the townsfolk buried her in an unmarked grave, reportedly with a stake through her heart to prevent her from rising from the dead. But Goody Cole's story doesn't end with her death. According to legend, her spirit did not rest peacefully in her grave. Strange occurrences began to plague the town of Hampton shortly after her passing. Crops failed, livestock mysteriously died, and residents reported seeing a ghostly figure wandering the streets at night. The townspeople believed that Goody Cole had returned to exact her revenge on those who had wronged her. In the late 1930s, Hampton residents, perhaps out of guilt or a desire to finally put the legend to rest, symbolically pardoned Goody Cole, erecting a memorial stone in her honor. Jersey Devil Tree, New Jersey. Located in Bernards Township, this seemingly ordinary oak tree has a dark and twisted history that has made it the subject of countless legends and ghost stories. Its unsettling past is marked by tales of murder, racial violence, and inexplicable phenomena. During the early 20th century, it is said that the KKK used the tree as a meeting place and a site for lynchings. It is said that the Klan members hanged black people from the tree and even burned some of them alive next to the tree. Another grim tale associated with the Devil's Tree is that of a local farmer who, in a fit of madness, murdered his entire family before hanging himself from one of the tree's branches. To be precise, the man, for whatever reason, decided to murder his entire family with an axe. After the deed was done, he visited the Devil's Tree and literally had a picnic. He then hanged himself. For instance, it is said that anyone who tries to cut down the Devil Tree will meet with misfortune or even death. This is often called the Devil's Curse. There are accounts of people who attempted to harm the tree only to suffer severe accidents shortly afterward. One such story involves a man who, after attempting to chop down the tree, was involved in a fatal car crash on his way home. This has led to the belief that the tree is protected by a supernatural force that punishes those who wish it harm. Interestingly, there's another story about some mysterious protector of this tree. According to some locals, many people who visited the tree were stalked on their way back home. While driving away from the scene, a pickup truck would follow them for some time before suddenly vanishing into thin air. One local said, "There's a big field, and right near the road is the tree. Supposedly, it's a portal to hell, and a sentinel guards it. He drives an old black Ford or Chevy pickup truck and will chase you down the road until a certain point. You will see headlights 1 second, and the next nothing. The car is just gone." La Mala Hora, New Mexico. This entity is not just a ghost, but a shape-shifting spirit with a malevolent purpose. According to the legend, La Mala Hora appears in 2 distinct forms. In its most common form, it manifests as a dark, misty figure that hovers over the road, almost like a cloud of shadows. This form is said to hypnotize or paralyze anyone who encounters it, leaving them vulnerable to whatever fate awaits them. However, in more terrifying accounts, La Mala Hora transforms into a hideous, demonic woman. With glowing red eyes, long, matted hair, and a twisted, monstrous face, this version of the spirit is not just an omen, but an active threat. One of the most chilling aspects of this legend is that La Mala Hora is not just a passive apparition. Unlike other ghostly figures who merely haunt or observe, she actively interferes with the lives of those who cross her path. Many stories tell of travelers driving late at night on lonely roads, only to suddenly feel an overwhelming sense of dread. Soon after, they see the dark figure of La Mala Hora looming ahead. The lucky ones manage to speed past her, though they often experience a close brush with death soon after, a car accident, a sudden illness, or the loss of a loved one. For those who aren't so lucky, encountering the demonic form of La Mala Hora can lead to a tragic end. One famous tale tells of a woman who was driving home from a late shift when she saw La Mala Hora on the side of the road. At first, she thought it was just a person in need of help, but as she slowed down, she saw the horrifying face of the entity staring back at her through the car window. The next morning, the woman was found dead in her car with no visible signs of harm, her face frozen in a look of sheer terror. If you ever find yourself driving through the vast emptiness of New Mexico after midnight, keep your eyes on the road and pray that you don't encounter La Malahora. Because if you do, it might just be your final journey. Sewer alligators, New York. Beneath the bustling streets of New York City lies a hidden world of tunnels, pipes, and sewers, an underground labyrinth that serves as the city's lifeblood. But according to one of the most enduring urban legends, this subterranean network is home to something far more sinister than just wastewater. They say that lurking in the dark, murky waters of New York's sewers are massive, man-eating alligators. According to the law, wealthy New Yorkers would return from vacations in Florida with baby alligators as souvenirs. These small reptiles were initially kept as pets, but as they grew larger and more difficult to care for, owners would flush them down the toilet, thinking they were ridding themselves of the problem. But the problem didn't disappear. It just went underground. The legend goes that these flushed alligators managed to survive in the city's vast sewer system, feasting on rats and whatever else they could find. The reptiles grew to enormous sizes, adapting to their dark, damp environment. As the years passed, the legend evolved. Some versions of the story describe alligators that have mutated due to toxic waste or other pollutants, growing to monstrous proportions and becoming even more aggressive. Others suggest that the alligators have formed entire colonies deep beneath the city, breeding and multiplying in the darkness. Most experts agree that it's highly unlikely. Alligators are cold-blooded creatures, and the cold, harsh environment of New York's sewers would make it difficult for them to survive for long. Additionally, the lack of sunlight and proper food sources would pose serious challenges for any reptile trying to make a home down there. However, the occasional sighting of alligators in odd places does happen, usually due to pet owners releasing their unwanted pets into nearby bodies of water. And while the idea of alligators thriving in the city's sewer system remains a terrifying tale, it's likely more fiction than fact. Vampire Beast of Bladenboro, North Carolina. It all began in late December 1953 when farmers started finding their animals dead in the fields. But these weren't just ordinary killings. Something far more sinister was at work. The animals, mostly dogs, were found with their throats ripped open and completely drained of blood. The sheer brutality of the attacks and the lack of blood around the bodies led locals to believe that a vampiric creature was on the loose. This strange predator was soon dubbed the Vampire Beast. Panic quickly spread throughout Bladenboro, with sightings of a mysterious creature becoming more frequent. Descriptions of the beast varied, but most agreed that it was a large, cat-like animal with dark fur, glowing red eyes, and razor-sharp fangs. Some even claimed it was as big as a bear, but moved with the agility and stealth of a panther. The idea that this creature could strike silently in the dead of night only added to the terror gripping the community. The origin of the beast is shrouded in mystery. Some locals believed it was an escaped exotic animal, possibly a wildcat or a panther that had wandered into the area. Others, however, were convinced that this was no ordinary animal. They whispered that the beast had supernatural origins, perhaps even cursed to wander the forests of North Carolina as a vampire-like predator. The fact that the creature seemed to kill solely for blood rather than food only fueled these eerie theories. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the killings stopped. By January 1954, the beast had vanished without a trace. Some believe the creature moved on to another area, while others think it may have died or gone into hiding. Miniwashitu, North Dakota. The Miniwashitu is an otherworldly being covered in a blood-red fur, with a single glowing eye in the middle of its forehead. Its back is said to be covered in sharp, spine-like ridges, and it has long, clawed limbs that it uses to drag its prey into the river's depths. But what makes the Miniwashitu truly terrifying is not just its grotesque appearance, but the madness it brings. The tribes believed that the Miniwashitu was a water spirit, an ancient entity that had existed since time immemorial. It was said that anyone who saw the creature would be driven to insanity, hearing its unearthly cries echo in their minds long after they had left the river. Those who heard the beast's mournful wails would either succumb to madness or meet a watery death. According to lore, the Miniwashitu would surface in the spring, when the ice began to melt and the river swelled with the thaw. It was believed that the creature fed on the souls of the drowned, dragging them to the bottom of the river to join it in eternal torment. To protect themselves, the tribes would perform rituals and offerings to appease the spirit, hoping to avoid its wrath during the dangerous spring floods. Over time, the legend of the Miniwashitu has persisted, with sightings and stories being passed down through generations. Some say that the Miniwashitu is a manifestation of the river's dangerous currents, a way for the ancient tribes to explain the tragic drownings that often occurred in the powerful waters of the Missouri. The Loveland Frog, Ohio. The Loveland Frogman first gained attention in May 1955. A local businessman claimed that while driving late at night along a dark, desolate road near the Little Miami River, he spotted 3 strange figures standing on the side of the road. At first, he thought they were people, but as he got closer, he realized these weren't ordinary people. They were frog-like creatures, standing upright, about 3 to 4 feet tall, with leathery skin and wide, frog-like faces. One of the creatures was holding a wand-like object that emitted sparks. Terrified, the man sped away, and the story quickly spread through the small town of Loveland. This initial sighting was strange enough, but the legend truly solidified itself in 1972 when 2 separate police officers claimed to have encountered the Loveland Frogman. The first officer, Ray Shockey, reported that while patrolling the area near the Little Miami River, he saw a large, frog-like creature dart across the road and into the river. Again describing them as described as about 3 to 4 feet tall, with rough skin and a distinctly frog-like appearance. The second officer, Mark Matthews, also reported seeing a similar creature later that same year. Locals have speculated about the origins of the Loveland Frog for decades. Some believe the creature is the result of a bizarre scientific experiment gone wrong, while others think it could be an undiscovered species that has managed to evade detection. A few even suggest that the frogman is tied to Native American folklore, possibly linked to water spirits or shapeshifters that are said to inhabit the region. Despite the numerous sightings, no concrete evidence of the Loveland Frog has ever been found. Shaman's Portal, Oklahoma. According to Native American lore, this place was sacred, a site where the earth itself would swallow up those who dared to tread too close. They believed that beneath the sands there existed a powerful force, something beyond human comprehension. The Apache shamans warned their people to stay away from the area, as it was cursed, a portal to another realm, where both body and soul could be lost forever. But as with many tales of warning, not everyone heeded the advice. The legend took a darker turn in the 16th century when Spanish explorer Francisco Vázquez de Coronado ventured into the region. As the story goes, Coronado and his men were in search of the fabled city of gold, El Dorado. They camped near what is now Beaver Dunes Park, unaware of the warnings from the native tribes. During the night, several of Coronado's men allegedly disappeared without a trace, seemingly swallowed by the earth beneath them. The terrified survivors spoke of strange green flashes of light emanating from the ground and the feeling of an unseen force pulling their comrades into the sand. Coronado quickly abandoned the area, but the tale of the disappearing men lingered, passed down through generations. It wasn't long before this strange phenomenon earned the site its ominous name, Shaman's Portal. Perhaps the most famous aspect is its popularity as an alien hotspot. Shaman's Portal has attracted the attention of paranormal investigators, UFO enthusiasts, and conspiracy theorists alike. Some believe that the area is a site of extraterrestrial activity, with the green flashes of light being attributed to alien spacecraft or otherworldly technology. Others suggest that the dunes hide a secret government installation, perhaps a buried facility left over from Cold War experiments. There are even whispers that the US military has conducted clandestine investigations in the area, but any official records remain sealed. People who supposedly saw UFOs in the area claim that so-called men in black visited them later on, urging them to never talk about what they had seen. Malheur Butte, Oregon. According to local law, the butte was once a gathering place for a coven of witches who practiced dark magic under the cover of night. These witches were said to perform malevolent rituals, summoning spirits from the underworld and casting curses upon anyone who dared to cross their path. As the story goes, the witches were eventually hunted down by angry townsfolk, but not before they placed a powerful curse on the land. This curse, locals believe, still lingers to this day, haunting Malheur Butte and the surrounding area. The butte has become infamous for the strange and terrifying experiences reported by those who venture too close. One particularly disturbing tale involves a group of teenagers who decided to camp out on the butte, hoping to debunk the legends. As the night wore on, they heard faint chanting carried on the breeze, and then, one by one, they saw ghostly figures emerging from the shadows. Terrified, the teenagers fled, only to find themselves plagued by nightmares and strange occurrences long after they left the butte. It's said that those who anger the spirits of Malheur Butte are never truly free of their influence. Charlie No Face, Pennsylvania. In the quiet, winding roads of western Pennsylvania, locals whisper of a figure that has haunted the area for decades. His name is Charlie No Face, but some call him the Green Man. The story of Charlie No Face begins with a real person, Raymond Robinson. Born in 1910, Raymond's life took a tragic turn when, at the age of 8, he was involved in a horrific accident. One day, while trying to climb a pole to get a closer look at a bird's nest, he accidentally touched a live wire carrying 11,000 volts of electricity. The massive shock severely disfigured him. He lost his eyes, nose, and part of his arm, leaving his face a melted, grotesque mask of scars. From that day forward, Raymond became a recluse, shunning daylight due to the way people reacted to his appearance. As a result, many urban legends surrounding this man were created. According to the legend, if you drive along the dark roads near Koppel or venture into the infamous Green Man's Tunnel at night, you might encounter Charlie No Face. They say his skin glows green, a result of the electrical accident that transformed him into something not quite human. Some even claim to have seen a faceless figure walking along Route 351, aimlessly wandering as if searching for something lost long ago. If you're unlucky enough to catch a glimpse of him, it's said that his glowing green face will haunt your dreams forever. Despite the fear and mystery surrounding Charlie No-Face, the truth is far more tragic than terrifying. Raymond Robinson lived a quiet life with his family. He didn't haunt tunnels or stalk roads with malicious intent. To avoid the stares and gasps of horrified onlookers, Raymond took to walking the lonely roads of Beaver County only at night. Dressed in long-sleeved shirts and keeping to the shadows, he became a figure of fear and fascination. In fact, those who knew him described him as a kind and gentle man who just wanted to be left alone. New England Vampire Panic, Rhode Island. The story begins in the late 1800s in the quiet town of Exeter, Rhode Island. Tuberculosis, known as consumption at the time, was ravaging families, and no one was safe from its deadly grasp. The Brown family was particularly hard hit. First, Mary Brown, the mother, succumbed to the disease, followed by the eldest daughter, Mary Olive. Soon after, the youngest daughter, Mercy Brown, fell ill and died in 1892. As if that wasn't enough, the last surviving member of the family, George Brown's son, Edwin, also became gravely ill. Desperate to save his son, George Brown turned to the only explanation that made sense to the fearful townspeople: the possibility that the dead members of his family were rising from their graves, preying upon Edwin and draining his life force. This belief, rooted in old superstitions and fears, led to a horrifying decision. The bodies of the deceased Brown family members would be exhumed to see if any of them showed signs of vampirism. On a cold March day in 1892, the townspeople gathered at the cemetery and unearthed the Brown family graves. Mary and Mary Olive's bodies had decomposed as expected, but when they opened Mercy Brown's grave, they found her remarkably well-preserved body, despite the fact that she had been buried for months. Her heart and liver still contained fresh blood, which the townsfolk saw as undeniable proof that Mercy was a vampire. In a gruesome ritual, they removed Mercy's heart, burned it to ashes, and mixed the ashes into a tonic. This macabre concoction was given to Edwin in the desperate hope of breaking the vampire's curse. Sadly, Edwin succumbed to tuberculosis shortly after, but the legend of Mercy Brown, the last vampire of Rhode Island, was born. The New England vampire panic wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a larger phenomenon that swept through rural communities across the region during the 19th century. Tuberculosis was a mysterious and deadly disease at the time, with no known cure. Its slow, wasting effects, where the victim would grow pale and weak, made it easy for people to believe that the dead were feeding off the living. Ghost treasure of Folly Island, South Carolina. Folly Island, with its secluded shores and dense forests, was a favored hideout for pirates looking to evade capture. Among them was the infamous pirate Captain Blackbeard, a name that struck fear into the hearts of sailors and coastal towns alike. According to local lore, Blackbeard and his crew buried a massive treasure somewhere on Folly Island before being cornered by the British Navy. The treasure, said to be filled with gold coins, jewels, and other priceless artifacts, was hidden so well that no one has ever found it. But Blackbeard's treasure is not the only thing left behind on Folly Island. Legend has it that some of Blackbeard's crew met a grisly fate at the hands of the British or were betrayed by their captain, leaving their souls trapped on the island. To this day, locals and visitors alike report seeing ghostly figures wandering the beaches at night, their eyes glowing in the darkness as they search for the treasure they were promised but never received. These apparitions are said to be the spirits of Blackbeard's crew, cursed to guard the treasure for all eternity, unable to rest until it is found. One of the most chilling aspects of the Folly Island legend is the idea that the treasure itself is cursed. Those who seek it out are often met with misfortune or worse. Over the years, numerous treasure hunters have scoured the island, only to encounter strange occurrences. Disembodied whispers or cannon sounds, and even sightings of shadowy pirates lurking in the trees. Some have even claimed to hear the ghostly sound of clinking coins and chains, as if the spirits are still counting their ill-gotten gains. Walking Sam, South Dakota. He is said to be a Wendigo-like spirit, a bringer of death and despair who preys on the emotionally fragile, particularly targeting the youth. Descriptions of Walking Sam are unsettling. He stands over 7 feet tall, impossibly thin, and his long arms seem to stretch unnaturally. His face is often described as featureless or shrouded in darkness, and he is sometimes depicted as carrying the souls of the dead on his back, each one representing a life lost to unaliving. According to the lore, Walking Sam roams the reservation at night, moving silently through the shadows. He appears to those who are struggling with depression, self-doubt, and isolation, feeding off their pain. His presence is often felt more than seen, described as an overwhelming sense of dread that suffocates the mind. Some say that if you encounter Walking Sam, you will hear him whispering dark thoughts, urging you to follow him into the abyss. Others claim that he stands at the edge of the woods, motionless, waiting for his next victim. During particularly dark times, entire groups of young people were said to have made pacts to end their lives, claiming that they were following Walking Sam. Local authorities and tribal leaders have had to intervene, leading to a series of community efforts to address the mental health issues that seem to feed the legend. Bell Witch Cave, Tennessee. The story of the Bell Witch begins in the early 1800s, with a farmer named John Bell who moved to Adams, Tennessee, with his family in search of a peaceful life. The Bell family began to experience strange occurrences around their home. It started with faint knocking sounds on the walls, whispers in the darkness, and the disembodied voice of a woman that seemed to come from nowhere. This voice, later identified as the Bell Witch, was said to belong to a vengeful spirit named Kate Batts, a local woman who believed that John Bell had cheated her in a land deal. As the disturbances grew more intense, the Bell Witch began to target the Bell family directly. John Bell and his daughter Betsy bore the brunt of the witch's wrath. Betsy was often subjected to violent physical attacks, her hair pulled, face slapped, and even pinched by invisible hands. John Bell's health began to deteriorate rapidly, with the witch taunting him constantly, promising that she would be the cause of his death. The torment continued for years, attracting the attention of neighbors, clergy, and even future President Andrew Jackson, who reportedly visited the Bell homestead to witness the phenomenon firsthand. Jackson's visit to the Bell family home is one of the most famous episodes in the Bell Witch saga. According to the legend, Jackson and his men set up camp near the Bell property, eager to uncover the truth behind the supernatural claims. However, before they could even enter the house, their horses became inexplicably paralyzed, and a voice from the unseen witch declared that they would proceed no further. Jackson himself was said to have exclaimed, "I'd rather fight the British at New Orleans than face the Bell Witch again." On December 20th, 1820, John Bell died under mysterious circumstances. The cause of death was officially recorded as poisoning, though the identity of the poisoner was never confirmed. The Bell Witch, however, took full credit for his demise, cackling triumphantly as John Bell drew his last breath. It is said that at his funeral, the witch could be heard laughing and singing joyously, a final insult to the man she had tormented for so long. In engagement, the witch declared that she would leave, but promised to return in 7 years. True to her word, she returned in 1828 to visit John Bell Jr., the eldest son of John Bell. During this visit, the witch is said to have revealed secrets of the past, present, and future to John Jr., predicting the Civil War and other significant events. Over the years, many have tried to explain the Bell Witch phenomenon in rational terms. Skeptics argue that the entire story was a hoax, concocted by the Bell family or their neighbors for reasons that remain unclear. Others suggest that the Bell family may have suffered from a collective psychological disorder, possibly exacerbated by the isolation of frontier life and the strict religious environment in which they lived. El Muerto, Texas. Deep in the heart of Texas, where the vast deserts stretch endlessly beneath the scorching sun, there lurks a terrifying legend known to locals as El Muerto, or the Headless Horseman of Texas. The story of El Muerto begins in the mid-19th century during the lawless days of the Texas frontier. A notorious Mexican outlaw named Vidal was infamous for his violent crimes, from cattle rustling to murder. His reputation as a ruthless bandit earned him a fearsome following, but it also put a target on his back. In 1850, Texas rangers and local ranchers, fed up with Vidal's reign of terror, decided to hunt him down once and for all. One fateful day, Vidal was captured by a group of Texas rangers led by a man named Creed Taylor, along with a famed rancher, Bigfoot Wallace. Seeking to make an example of the outlaw and deter others from following in his footsteps, they devised a gruesome punishment. After killing Vidal, they decapitated him, then strapped his headless body to his horse. As a final act of brutality, they tied his severed head to the saddle, letting the horse roam free in the wilderness. The legend of El Muerto quickly spread across Texas, and soon the Headless Horseman became a harbinger of doom. Those who encountered him were said to suffer misfortune, or even death. The eerie clattering of hooves in the night, accompanied by the ghastly silhouette of the headless rider, sent chills down the spines of even the bravest cowboys. Bear Lake Monster, Utah. Often described as Utah's own Loch Ness, the Bear Lake Monster has become one of the most enduring and frightening urban legends of the American West. The story of the Bear Lake Monster dates back to the mid-19th century, when Mormon settlers first arrived in the region. In 1868, a series of newspaper articles by Joseph C. Rich, a prominent Mormon settler and journalist, sparked widespread fear and fascination with his reports of a monstrous creature residing in the depths of Bear Lake. Rich claimed that local Native American tribes had long told stories of a giant serpent-like beast that lived in the lake, and that recent sightings by settlers confirmed its existence. According to Rich's reports, the monster was described as being over 50 feet long, with a snake-like body, large head, and powerful limbs. Witnesses claim to have seen the creature swimming just below the water's surface, occasionally rising up and creating massive waves. Some even reported seeing the monster dragging livestock into the lake, leading to its reputation as a deadly predator. Some versions even suggest that the monster is not just one creature, but a species of ancient reptiles that have somehow survived in the lake's deep, cold waters for millennia. Others claim that the Bear Lake monster is a shapeshifter, capable of transforming into different forms to elude capture and prey on unsuspecting victims. Skeptics often point out that Joseph C. Rich eventually admitted that his original articles were written as a joke, intended to entertain readers rather than report factual events. Northfield Pigman, Vermont. The origins of the Pigman legend date back to the 1950s, when a local teenager named Sam Harris mysteriously disappeared on the night before Halloween. Sam, just 17 years old, was said to be out causing mischief as part of the traditional Cabbage Night festivities, an evening when teens would engage in pranks and minor vandalism. But unlike his friends, Sam never returned home. A massive search was conducted, but no trace of the boy was ever found. What happened to Sam remains a mystery, but some say he became something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. According to local law, Sam Harris was transformed into the Pigman, a horrific creature with the body of a man but the head of a pig. Some say that this transformation occurred due to a deal with dark forces, while others believe that he was cursed after disturbing something evil in the woods that night. Descriptions of the Pigman vary, but most accounts agree on his ghastly appearance. A man covered in mud and filth, wearing a pig's head like a grotesque mask, or worse, having the head of a pig fused to his body. The Pigman is said to haunt the hills around Northfield, particularly the Devil's Wash Bowl, a remote area known for its eerie atmosphere and dark history. Over the years, locals have reported sightings of the Pigman wandering the woods at night, his eyes glowing in the darkness. He is said to stalk anyone who ventures too close, sometimes appearing at the edge of the woods, watching from a distance, before vanishing back into the trees. Some even claim to have heard the guttural grunts and squeals of a pig echoing through the forest, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. The Bunnyman, Virginia. The story begins with a tragic tale of escapees from a nearby asylum for the criminally insane. According to the stories, in 1904, the residents of Clifton, Virginia, petitioned to have the asylum shut down due to its proximity to their homes. The government eventually agreed, and the process of transferring patients to another facility began. However, during the transfer, one of the buses carrying the inmates crashed, and several patients escaped into the surrounding woods. The police quickly apprehended most of the escapees, but one man remained elusive. His name was Douglas J. Griffon, and he had been committed to the asylum after being found guilty of the brutal murder of his family on Easter Sunday. The search for Griffon continued for weeks, with the police finding nothing but the mutilated corpses of rabbits, their bodies strung up in the trees or left in gruesome piles. Local legend claims that Griffon had become deranged, living off the rabbits and fashioning clothing from their fur. He soon earned the moniker the Bunny Man. The legend truly cemented itself in Virginia's folklore, with the haunting tales centered around the Colchester Overpass, a small one-lane bridge now known as Bunny Man Bridge. It's said that after evading capture for months, Griffon was finally cornered at this bridge. Before the authorities could apprehend him, he was struck and killed by an oncoming train. But that's not where the story ends. Over the years, locals began to report sightings of a mysterious figure, dressed in a rabbit costume, haunting the bridge at night. Some claimed that he wielded a hatchet, while others said they found half-eaten rabbits scattered around the area. Mount Rainier UFOs, Washington. Mount Rainier, the majestic peak that dominates the skyline of Washington state, is not just known for its breathtaking views and treacherous climbs. It's also the birthplace of one of the most chilling and mysterious urban legends in American history, the Mount Rainier UFO sightings. The story begins on a clear afternoon on June 24, 1947, when a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying near the mountain. What he saw that day would not only spark a nationwide UFO craze, but also give rise to the term flying saucer. Arnold reported seeing 9 crescent-shaped objects flying in formation at incredible speeds, darting between the peaks of the Cascade Range. He described their motion as like a saucer skipping on water, a phrase that would forever be etched into the annals of UFO lore. Arnold's sighting was the first widely publicized UFO encounter in the United States, and it set off a wave of similar reports across the country. But what exactly did Arnold see that day? Some believe that the objects were experimental military aircraft, secretly being tested in the remote wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. However, no official explanation was ever given, and the military's denial only fueled speculation. Others suggest that the UFOs were extraterrestrial in origin, visitors from another world observing our planet from above. In the years following Arnold's sighting, Mount Rainier has remained a hotspot for UFO activity, with countless reports of strange lights, unexplained phenomena, and even alleged encounters with alien beings. Locals whisper about government cover-ups and hidden bases deep within the mountain, where otherworldly technology is supposedly being studied. Mothman Encounters, West Virginia. In the quiet town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, a terrifying figure emerged from the shadows in the mid-1960s, sparking one of America's most enduring urban legends. This creature is known as the Mothman, a towering humanoid with glowing red eyes and massive wings, said to soar through the night skies and lurk in the darkened woods. The legend of the Mothman began on a chilly November night in 1966, when 2 young couples were driving near an abandoned TNT factory just outside Point Pleasant. Suddenly, their headlights caught something strange. A tall, grey figure with wings folded against its back and eyes that glowed like burning coals. Panicked, the couple sped away, but the creature chased them, flying at incredible speeds. This horrifying encounter was just the first of many, as more and more sightings of the Mothman flooded in over the following months. But the Mothman wasn't just a harbinger of fear. It soon became associated with tragedy. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant to Ohio, collapsed during rush hour traffic, plunging cars into the icy waters of the Ohio River and claiming 46 lives. Some locals believe that the Mothman was a prophetic figure, a warning of the impending disaster. Sightings of the creature abruptly stopped after the bridge collapse, leading many to wonder if it was connected to the tragic event. Over the years, the Mothman has evolved from a terrifying creature into a symbol of mystery and intrigue. Some say it's a cryptid, a yet-to-be-discovered species, while others believe it's an omen of doom or even an extraterrestrial being. Whatever the case may be, the legend of the Mothman has become a defining part of West Virginia folklore, with countless books, documentaries, and even a movie, The Mothman Prophecies, adding to its eerie legacy. To this day, Point Pleasant embraces its strange visitor, hosting an annual Mothman festival that attracts curious thrill-seekers from all over. Rhinelander Hodag, Wisconsin. In the dense forests of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, there lurks a creature so bizarre and terrifying that its legend has been passed down through generations of locals. Known as the Hodag, this beast is said to be a monstrous hybrid of various animals, with the ferocity of a demon and a body that defies nature itself. The story of the Hodag first surfaced in the late 19th century, thanks to a man named Eugene Shepard, a local lumberjack and notorious prankster. According to Shepard, the Hodag had the head of a bull, the back of a dinosaur, and the claws of a giant bear. Its eyes glowed with an eerie green light, and it had a foul stench that could make even the bravest of men gag. But the most terrifying part? The Hodag was said to be born from the ashes of cremated oxen, a manifestation of the suffering and toil of these beasts during the logging days. Shepard claimed to have captured the Hodag in 1893, presenting it to the townspeople of Rhinelander as a fierce, living monster. The creature was kept in a dark, ominous shed, where locals and curious visitors alike could pay a fee to catch a glimpse of the fearsome beast. But as the legend grew, so did the skepticism. Eventually, Shepard admitted that the Hodag was a hoax, a clever concoction of wood, leather, and imagination. However, the story didn't end there. Despite Shepard's confession, the Hodag's legend only grew stronger, embedding itself into the very fabric of Rhinelander's identity. Today, the town of Rhinelander proudly embraces the Hodag as its mascot, with statues, festivals, and even a high school sports team named after the creature. Fouke Monster, Arkansas. Often referred to as the Southern Sasquatch, this creature has haunted the imaginations of locals for decades, earning its place as one of the most chilling urban legends in the state. The Fouke monster is typically described as a large, ape-like creature, standing between 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in thick, dark hair. Its most distinctive features include an overpowering stench that accompanies its presence. The creature is known to walk on 2 legs, with a lumbering gait that sends shivers down the spines of those who claim to have seen it. The legend of the Fouke monster gained national attention in the early 1970s, though reports of sightings date back much earlier. In 1971, a local family reported a harrowing encounter with the creature. According to the story, the beast attempted to break into their rural home, leaving deep claw marks on the walls and damaging the door. The family described the monster as a giant, hairy, humanoid figure with glowing eyes, and their account sparked a wave of sightings and media frenzy. This terrifying encounter became the basis for the cult classic horror movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek, from 1972, which further cemented the Fouke monster's place in Arkansas folklore. The film depicted the creature as a menacing force, lurking in the shadows of the swamp, always just out of sight, but never far away. Some believe the Fouke monster is a distant cousin of Bigfoot, a relic of a time when large, ape-like creatures roamed the earth. Others think it may be a supernatural being, a guardian of the swamp that appears only when its territory is threatened. Death Ship of Platte River, Wyoming. The legend of the Death Ship dates back to the 19th century, during the time of the Old West. According to local lore, this ghostly vessel appears on the misty waters of the Platte River under a specific set of circumstances. On foggy, overcast days, when the air is thick with moisture and the river seems almost otherworldly, the ship is described as a ghostly, spectral schooner, its sails tattered and torn, gliding silently through the mist as if crewed by the damned themselves. What makes this ship truly terrifying, however, is not just its appearance, but the omen it brings. You see, the death ship of Platte River is said to be a harbinger of doom, a vessel that foretells the death of someone near and dear to the person who witnesses it. According to legend, when the ship emerges from the fog, a ghostly crew can be seen on its deck, huddled around a lifeless body covered in a tattered shroud. As the witness watches in horror, the shroud slowly falls away to reveal the face of someone they know, someone who is still alive, but whose death is imminent. The origins of this terrifying legend are shrouded in mystery, but some say it began with the tales of early pioneers and fur trappers who traveled along the Platte River. These hardy souls often spoke of strange occurrences and eerie sights in the wilderness, but none more chilling than the ghostly ship that sailed through the fog. Over time, the story spread, and the death ship became a staple of Wyoming folklore. One of the most famous accounts of the death ship comes from the late 1800s, when a cowboy named Leon Weber claimed to have seen the spectral vessel. As the story goes, Leon was riding along the Platte River one foggy day when he spotted the ghostly schooner emerging from the mist. Terrified, he watched as the crew of phantoms appeared on deck, gathered around a shrouded figure. When the shroud fell away, Leon was horrified to see the face of his fiancée staring back at him, pale and lifeless. Shaken to his core, Leon rushed home, only to find that his fiancée had suddenly fallen ill. Within days, she was dead, just as the death ship had foretold. With that, today's episode comes to an end. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to check out the rest of my channel. There, I have amassed even more creepy stories that sound an awful lot like this one. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next one.